Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today, I'd like to talk about an article I came across in programminginsider.com by Mark Berman entitled How Flexible Workforce Solutions Support Business Continuity. And to talk with me about that today is Regina Phelps. Regina, welcome back.
It is such a great pleasure to be with you, Alex. It's been a long time. Maybe, I don't know, a month. I don't know.
Probably
Wow.
not that long. We talk quite a bit now, so maybe a week or two, it feels.
Well,
So
I think our topic today is pretty interesting for a lot of folks.
yeah, considering a lot of people now work from home or have that ability to work from home now,
Mhm.
mostly because of the pandemic. Uh,
Right.
but there's a swift to bring everybody back. But as
Mm,
this article pointed out, having people work from home and in multiple locations actually helps with operational, organizational resilience
mhm,
and helps with business continuity. So
mhm.
why do you think the push is to go everyone back in the office?
My first response to that really is I think it's a control issue. It's a control issue on the part of the employer. I think there's still some belief that if I can't see you, you're not working, even though the pandemic certainly proved that people could be very effective at working in a remote situation. But I still think there is a great need or want for employers to say, I want to see your butt in the chair every day. And secondarily, perhaps there's also a concern that not only are they possibly not working, but maybe they're not being as effective as they could be because nobody is supervising them, whatever that means.
Hmm. Well, the one thing I find rather interesting is you can be in the office and people are in all day meetings, so you never see them anyway.
Right. Or they can be
So
sitting at their desk doing I don't know what.
yeah, on a different floor, so
Right.
you never see them anyway. So what's the point? I don't get
Right.
it.
Right. I agree. And yet, I think in our client population, there was a huge effort to get people back to work in the last year. And I think that has been not on a full-time basis, more like out of a 5-day work week. Maybe they're in the office 3 days a week. But still, I think there's a great need for many employers to want to see people. Secondarily, when you think about the real estate portfolio they have, all of that space is empty. I think for many of them, if they're thinking about really changing their work style, then many times that means they're going to be decommissioning floors and they're going to have kind of a hoteling situation so that they're not paying for space that people really aren't in. So I've had employers some of our clients say things like that to me, like, yeah, I'm paying for all this space. I want people in it. Well, then the question is, do you really need to pay for all that space and could you do things differently? And now that it's gone
Mhm.
on for a while, I see more of my clients maybe reducing floor space and then turning into a hoteling situation and people have to book in advance and come in at a certain day based on meetings or things like that. So I think I think people are both coming to the thought that we don't have to be in the office as much, but many employers still want to see people periodically, I would say.
Mhm. So how does working from home, that solution, what used to be a backup solution,
Hmm.
is now kind of the give or take primary position now, people working from home, everyone can do it.
Hmm.
How does that help with resilience and business continuity if people are spread out?
Well, it really depends on the workforce and where they are. So I think if there's an assumption that you've got multiple locations, you've got people geographically spread out, how many companies are large enough that they might have multiple locations and they might be able to geographically spread people like around the clock, around the world, right? Statistically, not that many companies are truly that big. And so, if indeed you don't have a lot of locations, you're actually, in some cases, needing to really do a really good look at your overall risk profile. Because let's say that you're a large company, maybe you have several thousand employees, but you have one location. And most of those employees are in a geographical area of 100 miles. So there's a fallacy then based on your risk profile that you might be able to work successfully from home in all of those locations. Because if you have a significant event like some regional power outage, none of them are going to have power. So I think the first thing I would say to anybody who's looking at this as a work strategy is they have to really do a deep dive on their risk profile and really ask the questions, what are the most likely events to occur here physically that are going to impact our office and people that live in our geographical location? Now, if you are a company that has people spread all across the United States or maybe all over the world, then you have a lot more flexibility. But if you, I mean, what's the percentage of employers that have that? I mean, in Canada, how many people are that big that they've got people throughout the entire nation of Canada?
No idea.
Yeah, right.
But it can't be a huge amount. Like it just can't
Right,
be.
right. And that's the same here in the States. And you certainly see that in companies around the world. So I think you have to really look at your risk profile and you really have to ask yourself the question, am I falsely giving my sense that an idea that I have a lot of flexibility simply because I have people working remotely? If they're working remotely and working geographically some distance from the main office, then that could be the case, but not necessarily so. And so I think really digging into your risk profile, really looking at the employee map. So I would say if somebody's really seriously looking at this, they should basically run, the stats of where everybody's zip codes are and where they're geographically located, and then ask yourself, okay, based on the risk profile of my area, think about what you have in Canada, ice storms, snowstorms, thing, blah, blah, blah. Is that going to then impact everyone? Or do I have people that are outside of a region that, wow, they could still be working because they're, 500 miles from here?
And that could become one of your contingencies.
Yes.
If you're looking into your risk profile and you find out that all your crisis communications or your communication team all lives within an area or are spread out, you could easily identify if we have a blackout, using the example you mentioned earlier.
Right.
I all my communication people can't help me.
Right.
However, they're all spread out over 5 or 6 different provinces. So if the Toronto area, GTA area, has a power outage, I've still got people in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia
Exactly.
who could actually
Exactly.
still step in and help.
Right, right. So I think before you sort of ask the question about whether remote work is like the big savior, right, from a business continuity perspective, I think you have to do some smart work. You have to
Mm.
really have a good risk assessment of what's likely to happen in your area where the office is that you're concerned about, let's say. And then secondarily, we need to map our employee population and see where they are physically. And then you can then begin to really smartly answer the question, does it make sense that we have a lot of people working remotely?
Yeah, and what are those roles that are working remotely?
Right, right.
Because
Right,
that'll help identify, are they all a part of those critical services that we have to make sure
right.
continue on an acceptable level. So is
Mhm.
that helping us with resilience or not?
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
so it's really looking at the employee population, the overall risk profile, and understanding the geographics of that, and then looking at that along with your acute RTOs, recovery time objectives, so that people can look at those things and then begin to triangulate all of that, and then really ask that question, does it make sense? And so I think certainly passively, most of our clients have gotten away from having any sort of hot site that people go to. That's happened a long time ago. A lot of that was driven by the fact that we don't have that many crises that require, those kinds of more draconian measures. And then secondarily, they're expensive. So
yeah,
that idea of where you would go to a certain location, they'd have generators, et cetera, that's kind of a solution that kind of died probably 15 or 20 years ago for sure. There are still some of my clients that do that because of the acute nature of the work that they do. However, the most of them don't. And what they do is they have looked again at this geographical distribution. They've looked at where employees are located. They kind of understood what they're doing and how that maps back to the BIAs and the RTOs. And then what they're able to do is say, okay, yeah, this makes sense.
yeah. And now that a lot of the critical applications and services that IT is providing are in the cloud,
Right.
again, we don't need those big, large uh, alternate sites, DR sites and things like that, which, by the way, you had to be really quick on the phone if you were subscribed to one
Right.
because if you weren't the first one there, some other client gets
Right.
it, and
Right.
all
Right.
the money you paid for, you can't even use it.
Yeah. 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 Oh no, totally, totally. So I think I think the solution makes sense, but it should be done with a lot of thought in mind so that when you're arguing why this is a good solution, then I think that you can basically point to all of this research that you've done and you can more accurately reflect whether it's going to be helpful or not.
Yeah, and identify the services that can be distributed and those
Right.
that can't.
Right.
So you that would help identify, and actually that was one of the questions here, is help identify single points of failure that you may have in your either processes, the delivery of your services, your IT components. You can
Hmm.
say, hey, we're able to spread this out. We're going to be
Right.
more resilient, or
Right.
no, we can't.
Well, and the example that you gave was the idea, let's say all of your communications team is in one location. Okay, well, great. That's probably really helpful for their day-to-day work and when they're able to work together to get things out quickly and effectively. But if indeed, you have multiple locations and your comms team is all in one spot and they're the ones with a crisis, what is the backup for that?
Mhm.
And you might say, well, I think the backup is going to be we're going to have our comms team, drive X number of miles to go to some place where they can get internet connection or where they can work collaboratively or they can come to some central spot. But then you also have to look at the human aspects there. Just because you want them to go doesn't mean that they can go. They have family issues, they've got other things to deal with. And so, again, you have to constantly keep reevaluating and mapping these kinds of things so you really understand. And you should not make assumptions. And I
Yeah.
think that's what a lot of employers do is they think, well, they're if there's a disaster here, they'll drive 500 miles or they'll fly to another location. Well, no, they probably won't unless they're single and don't have any, obligations. They don't have kids, they don't have dogs, they don't have, it's you just can't make people get up and go when there's a crisis. So again, dispersing your workforce is great, making sure that they're all on different grids where there's less, geographical connections as far as crises are concerned, that you actually practice this. That would be another thing I would say.
Mhm.
Don't just assume your great strategy is going to work. It would be great to do some exercises related to actually this dispersed population to see if that really does work.
Yeah, that would be rather interesting too when you're holding your exercises, not just using that as the scenario, but also hold it so that some of them are actually at home or if in these geographic locations as well,
Exactly.
mimicking this is how we would really meet. We would have
Right.
people from New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and British Columbia with our Winnipeg office,
Hmm.
people sitting in there as well.
Yep.
That this is what it would look like.
Hmm.
Would it work?
Absolutely. And I think, again, if you make a lot of assumptions when you design plans and strategies, but you never exercise them, then we're still kind of playing a game and we really don't know if it's going to work. But if you do design an exercise and you have this unfold and people start standing up from different locations and are able to work remotely effectively, blah, 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 and also to be able to work, collaboratively, like many of my clients use Teams, they'll spin up team rooms. They'll start actually working in these different breakout sessions. I mean, that's what you should be practicing. Practice
Mhm.
your strategies. Don't just talk about them.
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations, whether they've got a distributed workforce or not, are
Hmm.
afraid to challenge the assumptions when it comes to testing, the strategies they've developed, the
Yes.
communication protocols they've developed or assume will be there.
Hmm.
And you mentioned, parents that may or may not be able to move. Well,
Right.
there's a difference between a parent that has a 16-year-old and a 6-year-old,
Absolutely.
if they're going to be able to travel. You
Hmm.
know, um, one of them, actually, under both cases, you probably wouldn't want to leave them alone.
Well, the 16-year-old, I
The
don't think I'd want to
6-year-old
be.
for
Yeah.
sure. The 16-year-old, I don't know.
God. Well, I think again, all of those things are so important, right? To really do a really thorough assessment at the beginning and really understand where everybody lives and what the impacts are and blah, blah, blah. Then secondarily, then be able to then exercise those to make sure that they actually really do work. And then again, I think you might find some surprises, but you also might find that there are things that just won't work or are perfect. But those things
Mhm.
always have to be relooked at again because employees are different from time to time. Things change, risk factors change. So develop a strategy, develop some plans, exercise them, revisit them with some regularity and make sure they still work.
And I think that's the perfect spot to end today's episode. Regina, thank you so much for talking about the workforce, working from home, and looking at our points of failure and our strategies. Always good listening to what you have to share with us.
Alex, it's always a delight to be with you.
Take care, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.